Hey, welcome back into the David L. Gray Show, voicing truth and reason. Hope you're having a blessed day. Glad you're here. Hey, we're going to get into a review video of the Jason Whitlock show. He had Royce White on there. They're talking about Freemasonry. They're talking about secret societies. It's kind of funny. So we're going to get into it. Appreciate you guys sent me this video. What me review it. I appreciate you guys think much of my expertise on this subject. I did spend a lot of years, over a decade, very active in Freemasonry, highest levels. Spent the last 13 years just kind of doing a myth busting, trying to help Catholics understand why they cannot be Freemasons, and really just trying to. There's a lot of harmful myths out there, and we're going to get into a couple of them in this video. And why are these myths harmful? What are the myths? Why are they harmful to Catholics? Well, the myths are sort of like a genre. There are things that are not true about Freemasonry, and it's not so much of me defending Freemasonry, but really speaking truth to the issue to help Catholics. Help Catholics how? Because say there's a Catholic who's basically excommunicated, but he's a Freemason. He's thinking about leaving Freemasonry. And so he starts listening to Catholics about Freemasonry. And what he's hearing is not true. They're telling him strange things. I know the highest degree is the 33rd degree. You promised in your ritual to kill your wife and stuff like this, which last week when I did a Masonic deliverance video, a lady on my Facebook page actually said that. She said, oh yeah, Freemasons are taking an oath obligation to kill their wife and kids. Over the 50 degrees I took as a Freemason, never even heard of that. But this lady says, oh, I'm not going to believe you, David. I'm going to believe this exorcist priest from Rome who said it. I'm going to believe him. These type of myths are harmful. A Catholic who hear these things and are thinking about leaving Freemasonry and being reconciled to the church, they're left with the choice. Am I going to believe these Catholics who are not telling the truth, or I'm going to believe my experience? Right. So he's saying that, well, if Catholics are lying about that, which I know isn't true, what else are they lying about? He stays in Freemasonry, right? Because we aren't credible. We're not trustworthy. We're not doing our research. We're not doing our due diligence. We're telling fibs, right? In another sense, so that's Catholics who are thinking about leaving Freemasonry. What about Catholics who are thinking about joining Freemasonry? It's the same thing. Catholics are saying these things that aren't true about Freemasonry. A guy maybe just read Dr. Taylor Marshall's book, Infiltration, believe that trash. He says, oh, man. And then he finds out that it's not true. Right? He maybe saw one of my videos about the book. He says, well, man, if Catholics are lying about that, and Freemasons are proving that that's not true, well, Freemasons sound more trustworthy. They sound more credible than these Catholics. So that's why I get engaged in the myth busting. It's not defending Freemasonry whatsoever. If you're a Catholic and a Freemason is communicated, you're forbidden from doing it. Freemasonry will open a door for you to get possessed by a demon or get some sort of oppression from some sort of demonic activity. It just opens up doors of darkness in your life. And the longer you're exposed to Freemasonry on that side of it, the closer you are going to hell. Freemasonry does not lead to heaven. It just doesn't. So it's a very dangerous organization in that sense. Of course, I've done a lot of talks on this. I don't buy the whole thing that Freemasons are running anything nowadays. How do I know that? Because there aren't any Masonic flags flying around the country. There's a bunch of gay flags, a bunch of Skittle flags flying. We know who's running this thing. All right. Freemasons had their day. Their influence, the things that they laid, the cornerstones that they laid in society, have been permanently destructive in a lot of ways. I don't know if they can ever be done. All right. Things such as separation of church and state, all these lies that they spread, I don't know if they're ever going to be done until Christ returns. So, but anyway, but that's why I get into the myth busting. And so let's get into this one with Jason Whitlock and Royce White. And Royce, Jason Whitlock, he has the Jason Whitlock show. Royce White, he's a regular guest on there. Royce White is also a former NBA player. He has his own podcast. He also plays 3-on-3 professional basketball. So that's the Jason Whitlock show. Let's get into it. This is the David L. Gray Show, voicing truth and reason, the best and most honest podcast in Catholicism. Let's get into it.
Hovering over the skies of a post-Christian society, we have spotted a man with a donut in one hand and rosary beads in another.
Child, I'm about to whoop Satan's behind.
He is boldly proclaiming truth and reason like no rigid Catholic ever has before. The David L. Gray Show begins now.
When I think of the gatekeepers, I think of secret societies,
Yeah.
Freemasons, at the heart of this secret society, and that's a colorless thing. Freemason.
All right, just a little preface. I gave you a preface about who Jason is, who Royce is. Preface to the video, they're talking about Ice Cube. Ice Cube's a rapper, got started in NWA way back in the 80s. Now he's an actor, movie director. He runs the 3-on-3 league. And so he put out a video on Twitter talking about these gatekeepers and how he's not really in a club and how he's trying to deconstruct the club. And so they're giving a commentary about some of the things that Ice Cube has said in that video.
Come in all shapes, sizes, and colors.
Well, no.
They do.
No, they don't.
My grandfather was a Freemason.
No, he was a Prince Hall Mason. Not the same, but I get what you're saying.
Yeah, secret society. He was 32nd degree Mason.
But, you know, not to cut. Keep going.
No, I don't mind being corrected.
No, I just think that, you know, again, racism has been used as such a cudgel on the modern American mind.
Let me pause here just for a second to set this up for you. So what just happened there? So Jason Whitlock, he wants to talk about how Freemasonry is these gatekeepers, people who are like controlling the world and all this type of stuff. And so Royce White, he wants to make a distinction between when I was a Freemason, what we would call mainstream Freemasons and Prince Hall Freemasons. Both of them fall under the same umbrella of what is called Anglo-Rite Freemasons. So you have your Anglo-Rite, plural, and you have your Continental Rite. All right. I made videos about this. I made a whole master class about it. If you want to take my master class of Freemasonry, so I won't get into details here. There's other places you can go to hear about that. So you have a lot of different rights, a lot of different umbrellas, but particular to what's relative to this video. So Royce White wants to make a distinction between these Anglo-Rite Freemasons. And so the point he wants to make is based upon the social construct race, right? That he's saying that there's this group called Prince Hall Freemasons, founded by an individual named Prince Hall. Prince Hall and 14 other men were initiated in the Irish Regiment Lodge number 441, and I think in 1774, 75, or it slips my mind for the moment. And so these 14 men of African, Haitian descent, whatever, living in Northeast, were initiated in Freemasonry. And from there, they started their own lodge, and it spread around the world eventually. Royce wants to say, well, those aren't real Freemasons. He wants to say that, well, mainstream Freemasons, so to speak. And mind you, that Prince Hall Freemasonry is older than a lot of mainstream Grand Lodges in this country. Right? They got their charter also from England. England gave them, so they're very much legitimate. They don't have any different degrees. They're just like all Anglo Freemasons. Even in the third degree. In a third degree, you do have a difference between your Anglos and your Continental. It ends a little bit differently. But all Anglo Freemasonry is largely the same, except for little minor details from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. But Royce White wants to say, oh, those aren't real Freemasons because they're black. And so that's the preface to this. And he makes a lot of mistakes along the way. I'll clean up a couple more as we go along. But it's an interesting discussion. But it sort of buys into that myth that's been a long, even the Catholicism has been around a long time. When Father Burke from New York, he was commissioned by Rome to investigate why more black people aren't becoming Catholics. And this is in the early 1900s. And he says, well, one of the issues why a lot of black people aren't becoming Catholics because a lot of them belong to secret societies like the Freemasons. And then he wrote back to Rome. He says, well, I know that there's a law, there's a teaching of the church, you cannot be a Catholic and a Freemason. That's a dogma. But these black Freemasons, they're not as dangerous as the other ones. For them, it's just a social group. Lie. The problem is that the Catholic Church has never made a distinction between rites because they all believe and practice the same thing. So regardless of whether you're Indian, whether you're so-called black, so-called white, it's still Freemasonry. So the Catholic Church has never made a distinction. It's problematic that Royce White, who calls himself a Catholic, is making this distinction. He's outside of what the church teaches right now. But I'll let it play for a little bit longer now. I may have another comment shortly.
And it's become so warped that we forget that there was genuine racism. And the actual genuine racism is right there in the secret societies that still run us today. And there's a reason why the Freemasons created an entire separate group that the blacks could join. And all these grandstand black bourgeoisie sellouts still walk around like the highest calling would be for them to be accepted into this secret group. And they're still calling you nothing but house Negroes. Right out in the...
So that's one of the second problems I clean up real quick. So there, even in mainstream Freemasonry, it was never exclusively all white. In fact, one of the earliest instances, I forget the state, is somewhere on the East Coast, there's a lodge consisting predominantly of black men who was not a Prince Hall lodge. So it was never always predominantly white. The further you got away from the South, the less white it was. That's obvious. Prince Hall Freemasonry also was never exclusively black. Both mainstream and Prince Hall Freemasonry went after the elites of the society, elite people in society, because Freemasonry never wanted to be Protestantism. It never wanted everyone to belong to Freemasonry. It never wanted to influence culture from a horizontal perspective. It also always wanted to influence culture and society from a top-down perspective. So you go after the elites in society. And so in Prince Hall Freemasonry, we see for hundreds of years, only your elites in society belong to Prince Hall Freemasonry. We could run down the list, all right, of those individuals. It's really just the who's who. So really no distinction here. So that's a problem it makes. Mainstream Freemasonry is never exclusively white. The second thing, this is outdated information on Royce White's part. Now, keep in mind that Royce and Jason Whitlock, they're just having a conversation. These are not experts. They don't present themselves as experts. Maybe Royce does. I don't know. But the conversation was set up by Jason is like, hey, we're just going to sit around and talk about a subject. It's like we're in our backyard drinking a couple of beers. We're just going to talk about this, kick it around. All right. Just guys just shooting the crap. So they're not saying that, hey, we done research. They're just saying, hey, we done a Google search. That's what they're saying. And throughout this video, oftentimes they say, I heard. They say, I heard. Then they never say I researched, or this comes from my thesis. This comes from my lived experience. No, they're just shooting the crap. But it's outdated crap. That's the problem. So since the late 1980s, Prince Hall Freemasonry, I would say since the integration, mainstream Freemasonry has looked less and less and less predominantly white. Even in Columbus, I lived in Columbus, but I don't know, 8 years ago or something like that. I knew a lot of so-called black men in Columbus who were not Prince Hall Freemasons. So very integrated in Ohio. And like anything, everything since integration has ended has become more, since segregation ended, has become more integrated. That's everything, including Freemasonry. And since the late 1880s, your mainstream Grand Lodges and your Prince Hall Grand Lodges have recognized each other. They do a lot of things together. Back in the early 2000s, I was the first Prince Hall Freemason to become a mainstream, join a mainstream lodge. I was made even a senior deacon in the Ohio Lodge of Research. So there's crossover like that. So this is really out. So the information that Royce White is spitting out, it's like 40 years old. It's not even current. So he needs to really update his Google search to do a little bit better here.
In the public, not doing it behind closed doors like they would do Ice Cube. They're doing it right out there on the street. Here's the Mason group for you Negroes. You could never be a part of this crown-based Mason scam. But go ahead.
Outdated.
No, look,
My grandfather was a Prince Hall Mason too, and he died before we had a chance to have this conversation. He was thinking about, proposing me, and he never got around to that. He died of cancer before.
And that's something we should look up with Royce. he's saying he's a Catholic. He was born that way. But he's saying that his father was a Freemason. So he was thinking about becoming a Freemason. Problematic for a Catholic anyway. So
before that would happen. But I know a bunch of Prince Hall Masons, and I just sit there sometimes and wonder, how did you guys accept being brought into a second class?
I'm going to tell you why, Royce. Take my great-grandfather, who was likely a Prince Hall Mason or whatever, but being a Mason stopped him from being lynched. They carried him out to the tree to lynch him. He gave them the Mason signal, and they didn't kill him.
Well, listen.
And that's why a lot...
Moral hazard in the history of this nation and the history of our community, black people, had ramifications beyond the local. And some people should have chose to die before they induction into a satanic cult.
No question. That's easy to say, though.
Oh, I get it.
Living in 2023, as you take my great-grandfather living in the early 1900s, and your best friend may have been lynched, or they may have, when you're out at that lynching tree, and the only thing between you and death is some kind of little secret signal or handshake or some, I think they said it was the way he stood or something, let him know that he was a Mason, and they didn't kill him. And so a lot of people, they say that's why a lot of black people join the Masons, particularly in the South.
It's not
a safety issue.
It's not true. It's not true. The Masons have a propaganda.
That's Royce is always the smartest guy in the room, right? And so I don't know what part of what he's saying that Jason said isn't true, because, well, at least Jason's last point was absolutely true. It's documented to be true. That a big part of why a lot of so-called black men in the South especially, joined the Masonic Lodge was for protection. This is the same thing that Father Burke said in his report to Rome when he calls it a social organization. It's for social welfare, it's for networking, it's for all these social aspects, it's for protection, right? And so the Prince Hall Lodge, it's impossible to tell the story of so-called black history in America without telling the story of the Prince Hall Lodge, because it's deeply ingrained into Protestantism. Lodges, these Prince Hall lodges in the churches, especially the AME church and the Baptist church, oftentimes share the same space. They share the same leadership. Your preacher in the church was your worship master in the lodge. It's even the AME church started by Richard Allen. Richard Allen was a Freemason. And so for a long time, all your bishops in the AME church, you had to be a Freemason. And so, because it's just deeply ingrained. So Royce White, when he says he's wrong, Jason is wrong. No, Royce is wrong. Jason made a very accurate and true point. People did join the Masonic Lodge for protection. It's really just an old Masonic principle that the lodge has a community and it's for protection. That's just the basic Masonic principle. So that's weird. He says that's not true, but Royce is the smartest guy in the room.
Machine. They run the propaganda machine. So the whole Freemason propaganda is that we fought against slavery. No, they didn't. They were the progenitors of slavery. They were the progenitors of the entire eugenics movement. Who was Sir Galton?
All right, so Royce is about to get off into his conspiracy hole here. But one point of correction, I will say that a lot of Masonic lodges were part of the Underground Railroad. Again, this is documented. They even have, it's been documented on quotes. Quotes, people used to put together quotes that had road signs and map signs about how to navigate the Underground Railroad. So this is one way we know through quotes that a lot of Masonic lodges were used in the Underground Railroad. Not just Prince Hall lodges, but also mainstream lodges once you get further up north. So yes, Freemasons in this country did play a role in helping to end slavery, particularly in the North. Not so much in the South, obviously, but once you get further north. So, but let's get into some conspiracies now.
Who were these people? When I talk about the crown, a lot of people go, "Oh, you're talking about the crown." It's like, just know where the stuff comes from. Sir Galton was instituted by the crown to take Darwinism and basically modify it and turn it into what is now known as the social Darwinist theory. And the social Darwin.
So he's talking about Sir Francis Galton, very notable eugenicist, 1800s. He became a Freemason when he was just 22. I don't know how active he was in Freemasonry, whether Freemasonry really played a part of his life, but you're in England, you have a certain social standing. Becoming a Freemason is what you did. Okay, so most of the people who we're going to look at that period in time who were influential and were not a Catholic are going to be Freemasons. So that's Sir Galton. He makes an interesting point, but the point he wants to make about eugenics and Freemasonry is that, well, here's Galton, predominant, a very influential eugenicist. He's a Freemason. And like I said, he was since he's 22 years old, because that's what you do.
Darwinist theory was taken around the universities, even way back then, to justify racism. And so, and don't get me wrong, there's a Republican Party. What the Republicans are doing at the grassroots level is different than what the Republicans are doing at the RNC. So I'm not saying there's not some group of Freemasons that were abolitionists, but the Freemasons as a movement is completely satanic and by default deeply eugenicist.
So let me be clear to anyone listening, watching at home. Nothing I'm saying is a defense of Masonry.
Right.
Nothing. I think the whole thing, I think all these secret societies, and I say this respectfully to guys that are like brothers to me, that I love to death, that are part of these Greek secret societies.
Yeah.
I think the whole thing is satanic. The whole thing, and I don't think they're aware of it.
No, they're not.
And so I'm not trying to disparage them, but this whole little secret society thing, when you start trying to figure out why we have so much chaos in the world and all of this sexual perversion that is at the root of this. And it's like, why do these Masons wear aprons over their penises and all? It's all sexual perversion. And when I started going down the rabbit hole of Prescott Bush and Skull and Bones.
Masons?
And,
Nazis.
Yeah, and like Skull and Bones, this Yale thing that John Kerry, and it don't care whether you're Republican or Democrat, both the Bushes that were presidents, they're, in order to get in them groups, they're getting in coffins naked, masturbating, and getting their anuses stimulated, sodomized. That's what you have to do.
Look, I don't know if that's true or not. I mean, in a way, we don't have any reason to believe that yet. I mean, they've kicked out so many myths about Freemasonry. We don't know. In the past, Jason has kicked out myths about Catholicism. So Royce is a myth machine. So it's interesting, though. That's a little bit. I don't know if it's true or not, but that's wild.
Get it? And we wonder why the LGBTQ seem to have so much power in this country. Everybody has had a bone buried in their skull.
I mean, first off, you got to be a weird, sick kind of a dude to be able to jerk off in a coffin anyway. But again, I said we live in a jerk off society, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Look, I'm not saying anything about all Masons. I know there are a lot of people who join the Masons for a variety of reasons. Mostly, it's seen as a symbol of professional and economic growth, right? And it's a part of this whole capitalist scam that says, you're only as good as your network. It's not about what you know, it's who you know, right? The whole who you know mantra of American society lends itself to secret societies. And so a lot of people are walking around at the behest of secret societies and don't even really know it. And then there are some idiots out there who really believe that when they walk into the Mayo Clinic, that it's a bastion of human well-being.
You just took a shot at the Mayo Clinic. You got to clarify that.
Well, I'm not taking a shot at Mayo per se. I'm not saying there aren't great doctors there or that they don't save lives or any of that. What I'm saying is that the net modus operandi of the entire medical industrial complex is to create the opposite of human well-being, and then to be able to benefit off it, profit when it can, but ultimately control society. And I know that because my great uncle was a 33rd degree Mason, Alfred Aubrey, who was a.
All right, so like the myth of the 33rd degree, that's something else that we have to deal with, right? That people throw out the 33rd degree thing as if though that's like the highest degree there is, when I really don't know where that comes from, right? I think because that's probably the only degree system that goes by numbers, but most degree systems don't go by numbers. Okay. So I think people know there's a third degree and they think that it keeps going up from there up to 33, which isn't true. We're talking about different rights, right? So someone like, say, Sir Francis Galton, he wouldn't even have known about the Scottish Rite. He would have just been a third degree, which is probably the highest degree in Freemasonry. So when he's around, there wasn't even a Scottish Rite that he would have joined like it is today. So the whole myth of the 33 degree thing is something we have to, like, as Catholics, we have to just throw out of our head, right? Because it reduces the danger of Freemasonry as a whole. Because we have in our head, 33, that must be really dangerous. That's the highest degree. No, really the first 3 degrees are the most dangerous, because that's where you get the most anti-Christ teachings at. Once you get to the Scottish Rite, past the 17th degree, they start talking about Jesus and the Pope in a positive way. In the Knights Templar, they're talking about Jesus and the Pope in a positive way. So, I wouldn't say the Pope in a positive way, the papacy itself in a positive way. So we have to get this out of our head. And so they're going to throw away this thing, 32, 33, this whole thing. But here he has another family member. I don't know if this is a different family member or the same one that's also a Freemason. This is really problematic on his behalf, his family tree.
Waker, who was an immigrant from Norway, and his office was in the Masonic Lodge in Minneapolis. He was the dean of the dentistry school at the University of Minnesota. And then he was ousted there because he wanted to revolutionize universal health care, and he wanted to include dental care. He said you can't have a comprehensive health if your mouth isn't clean. So he wanted to bring that practice into the scope of full medicine. And he took a lot of backlash from that, from dentists who wanted to keep it private so they could price gouge the American people, and the other medical community who wanted to keep him sort of out of their hair. So when he was ousted, he ended up finishing his career as the dean at Columbia. I mean, Columbia is the bastion of New World Order, and that was my great uncle, and I'm proud of his legacy and the work he's done. But every day I start to question it as I see how these societies roll out these plans, and I can't help but think he may have been involved in it.
There's people, if he's 33rd degree, you know exactly what he was doing.
But the question is now, are there some people at the 33rd degree level that are there to do reconnaissance? Is there a war and a pendulum going both ways? Are there people who make it there that are still honorable, who want to defeat it from within inside? We don't know these things. Everything's up on the bar right now. I mean, and I don't want to get too far off into la la land here, but look, Kennedy was probably a Mason.
Yes, who began to speak out.
So John F. Kennedy was not a Freemason. And at least it's not documented that John F. Kennedy was a Freemason. No Masonic lodges ever say he's a Freemason. Nothing. There's no reason for us to ever believe that John F. Kennedy was a Freemason. Not saying that he's a good Catholic. No, I don't think anybody's saying that. But John F. Kennedy was not a Freemason. So that's I don't even know where. I have to Google that. Like, where does that come from? Like, John F. Kennedy was a Freemason. I never even heard that myself as a Freemason or as a Catholic anti-Freemason. So that's weird.
Against secret societies.
Absolutely.
Right before he got killed.
And I'm a Christian, so we must believe in repentance. I hope all of those people who are at that 33rd degree level will repent.
Again, that's the myth we have to break, dude. It's not the 33rd degree. That's not the highest degree. That's not the most dangerous degree. I would argue the third degree is the most dangerous. So why don't we pray for the first degree guys? I don't. It's weird, man. But I get it. They're just sitting around with a beer and some in a bratwurst, just shooting the crap, right? These aren't intelligent. This isn't like a high level intelligent conversation. I get it. I'll stop getting frustrated so much, but it's getting a little bit frustrating, especially from a Catholic, so-called Catholic Royce White, putting this misinformation out there and make it seem like innocuous or not as dangerous if you're not a 33rd. Man, it's all dangerous. You just can't belong to any of it. Flat out. Full stop.
And fight back against the Satanism that they see.
You know, they say Lincoln was not a Mason.
They also say that he was black.
They say
that he was a Jew.
They say he's a black and a Jew.
And they say that Lincoln wasn't a Mason, and that Kennedy spoke out against secret societies and perhaps regretted being a Mason. And it's interesting. Kennedy and Lincoln, what do they have in common? And you know who was a Mason? John Wilkes Booth.
Wars from within. You know, wars from within. I mean, you know, so when you get to that level, and I only brought my uncle up to say this. And you asked me about Mayo, right? I said I made a comment about Mayo. My uncle was friends with Dr. Mayo. You can go back and read the minutes of him and Mayo talking at medical conferences in Rochester back in the early 1900s. And they had disagreements. So you have cults, and then you have factions within cults that go to war with each other. Kind of like you're seeing on the world stage right now between ourselves and Russia and the Ukraine. These are global sort of secret societies that have interests, and sometimes they clash.
And so, and I'm sorry, I'm just down this rabbit hole. It's fascinating because I have wanted to talk to you about this. Did you know that the way that Washington, D.C. is laid out geographically and everything, it's all consistent with Masonic principles?
Yeah.
And that, you know, it blew my mind because, you know, we have this authentic Christian founding, but people are saying that, like, you know, our documents.
All right, let me just touch on a couple of things real quick. So I'll put this image on the screen here. So Washington, D.C. was, the layout of it was designed by a Freemason. I think his name was starts with an L. He's a French guy. So the font, yeah, designed by him. And so this has been around for a long time. Even when I was a Freemason, I would study this. I wasn't really convinced as a Freemason. It appears to me, once you look at a map, that there are roads that are leading to, say, the White House, the Washington Monument. There's some center points where roads want to angle into, and so if you're designing a city, you want roads headed in this direction. Of course, you're going to have other roads that intersect with those roads, and they're going to create right angles, horizontals, perpendiculars, just all these geometrical angles, just because of how it's being designed there, right? The other way you would have designed it is you just had a road going, say, to the White House, just directly to the front door like that, rather than at two angles like this, right? That would have created a different design. Now, Lafont, who wasn't really active as a Freemason, was that intentional? I don't know. We don't know. It's interesting. There's a lot of intersecting lines that at times looks like a square and compass, other times looks like a pentagram, other times looks like the letter A. Interesting. You're not going to hear me being like put on a cape and defend Lafont or what he did, or be surprised that maybe this is why Washington, D.C. is basically infested with demons. A lot of demonic activities going on in Washington, D.C. Maybe that's why. Maybe it's a whole system of just invocation of demons. I don't know. And I didn't know as a Freemason, I wasn't convinced then. I don't know if I'm really convinced now, if it's intentional, nefarious, unintentional, innocent. Don't know. Interesting though. Jason Whitlock, he's always been on this kick as well. He always wants to talk about how the United States has like some sort of Christian founding. It's a point which I refuted consistently over the years. I have a wonderful essay over at 1 Peter 5 called The United States of Freemasonry, where I prove and document that our founding was not Christian. It was definitely influenced by Freemasonry, more so by Freemasonry. We don't have one Christian document, whether it's the revolutionary document or the Constitution, that says anything explicit about Christianity. The God that's named in the revolutionary document is what? A creator God? We're all endowed endowed with the same creator. That's a God of Freemasonry. That's the grand architect universe. Grand architect universe, creator, same God. It's just this deistic God. We know one activity that he does, creation, architect. That's not the God of Christianity. That's not the triune God. Our Constitution, none of our founding documents, Bill of Rights, nothing says anything about Jesus Christ. That's important to mention because we do have constitutions around the world, even around that time, that do mention Jesus Christ. We know what a Christian constitution looks like. Ours ain't one. Okay, so that's the first point. The second point is once you do get the Constitution, look at the First Amendment. The First Amendment of the Constitution, talking about religious freedom, is the Article 1 of the Anderson's Constitution of Freemasonry. It's almost verbatim. It's like the writers of the Constitution kind of looked at Anderson's Constitution and said, hey, this is a good idea. Freedom from religion is what they were talking about. If you don't think they were talking about freedom from religion, well, you just have to go to Jefferson and some of the things that he was doing in Virginia around that time. I forget the name. I have it in my article at 1 Peter 5, but you can take a look at it there. But Jefferson, it was a lawsuit, I believe. Yeah, it's a Virginia Statute for Religious Freedom. That's what Virginia Statute for Religious Freedom is, drafted by Thomas Jefferson. And in that statute, Thomas says that this bill was to provide religious freedom to the Jew, the Gentile, the Christian, the Muslim, the Hindu, and the infidel of every denomination. All right. So what he's doing here, he was elevating the moral law of the state above the diminished value of divine law. So if you don't believe that that's what the First Amendment was talking about, freedom from religion, then you miss the whole point, right? Because Thomas Jefferson proves it himself. There's always about freedom from religion. Why was freedom from religion is important. Why is that Masonic principle? It plays back into indifferentism, which is a key Masonic principle, that in separation of church and state. So you want to create an atmosphere where the state and the people of the state are hostile towards religion, because that's true freedom. Because if we can get religion out of the way, then man can be free to do what? Pursue freedom, or his life, liberty, and happiness. This pursuit of life, liberty, and happiness is not something that is driven by religion or dogma, but is driven by the individual in his own personal, unformed, deformed conscience. It's a pursuit of life, liberty, and happiness that's outside the construct of freedom. That's really driven by the state. And we see that today. Life, liberty, and happiness is driven by commerce and exchange. This commercial culture of American that we have, this Americanism, it's just really commerce driven. It's commercial driven, that the state tells you what type of life you should have. It tells you what happiness looks like, and it tells you what freedom looks like. You're free to sin, free to get an abortion, free to get divorced, you're free to be a skittle. It's a weird thing, that a demonic thing, that our Constitution and the principles of Freemasonry put forth in this country. So we have to reject the lie from Jason Whitlock here that this silly thing, unresearched, that he's come up with. I get it. It sounds noble, it sounds pious. We want to believe American has some sort of Christian roots, but it doesn't. We know what a Christian founding document looks like. We know what a Christian Constitution looks like. It's not that hard. You can look it up. So, but Jason goes in this whole thing. I'll play it here.
Are influenced by Christian beliefs, but the way buildings and disease, the way our symbols and all the things that we put in place are Masonic. And so we had basically two competing foundings.
No, it's the same founding.
Constitution, Declaration of Independence, those were biblical Christian foundings, the ideas that we're going to base the country on, but the planning and the...
And so Jason wants to make a distinction between how Washington is laid out, which he says is Masonic, and then he wants to say, well, the founding principles or Constitution documents and Revolution documents, that's something different. Like there's some sort of competition in place. No. If that is true about what LaFont did years after, the Constitution and all this stuff, and what the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence stand for and the Bill of Rights stand for, well, they're both the same thing. They're like symbiotic. They're like synonymous. They're like twins. Tied at the hip and the heart. They're the same thing. If one is true, the other is true. They're not. Jason has to break this idea that's not grounded in any facts, that America has like some sort of Christian founding, when it really, this country was birthed by Freemasonry. Any Freemason who is reading the Declaration of Independence, a revolutionary document, or they're reading the Constitution, back then they're looking, this is a point of triumph for the Freemason. They're looking at this like, wow, this is a wonderful Masonic document. In fact, yes, the Declaration of Independence and even the French revolutionary document, even the Constitution, the First Amendment, these are wonderful pieces of Masonic literature. These are pieces of Masonic literature that should be in every Masonic library. In fact, I think they are. So Jason really has to break the shackles from this mindset. Right? I think he can do it. Right? He likes to talk about he only graduated from Ball State, which is like a super high school university about Toledo, with a 2.5, right? But he's smart about sports, right? I think he does research. I mean, he's no Stephen A. Right? I'm not saying that guys like Royce White, who just like athlete, that they can't talk about these things. I'm not that shut up and dribble guy all the time, especially in a conversation like this. They're just shooting the crap. But Jason, I think he can do better on this topic. He just has to do some research. So if you know Jason, send him my article over 1 Peter 5. It's called The United States of Freemasonry. If you know him, send it to him, and hopefully he'll read it and have an awakening. In that article, I have like footnotes, right? We like people who read footnotes. We like people who read books, not just do Google searches or talk about what they said, who I heard. No, we like people who spend a little time, do a little research, and become smart on things, right? So hopefully Jason will get there.
Design of the country and all of our symbols, all these buildings are consistent with Masonic principles, and it feels like the symbols and the way that society is organized and designed, perhaps is winning. And the Masonic people want to throw out the written stuff. They want to redo the Constitution and make it more consistent with the way we design.
It was just a means to an end for them.
All right, so that's the David L. Gray Show today. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you got something out of it. Be back Wednesday. Got Jerry Jacobs Jr. on. We're going to review a video by Sadia Khan. So that's going to be interesting. Stay tuned for some relationship advice, and I'll see you guys soon. But until then, until next time, blessings and shalom to you and to yours. Thank you for watching the show. For more content, just smash that subscribe button and a notification bell, and you'll be notified whenever I upload new content, hopefully, but not always. You'll get that notification. And also, please consider becoming a sponsor of the show. You can do this a couple ways, either by going over to patreon.com/David O. Gray, and just for a couple dollars a month, you'll have access to all of our exclusive content over at stdominicsmedia.com, or become a YouTube member of this channel. And again, for just a couple of dollars a month, you'll have access to all the content on this YouTube channel that is older than 5 months. But either way, please keep me in your prayers and I'll keep you in mind. And remember that Jesus loves you and is there for you. Thank you.